Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation. I'm Linda from TCC Procurement, and today I'm going to present the basics of tax dollar management for employees of Tarrant County College District. During the presentation, all of you, please enter all of your questions in the Teams chat field. We will answer those questions at the end of the presentation, and the information will be archived and forwarded to all attendees for future reference, along with a copy of the presentation information. And I'm staying on this one. That was my introduction in case this one was recorded, as I thought it would be. Placing the power of funds commitment in the hands of Tarrant County College District employees is a presentation that outlines TCCD dollars management as it pertains to community state tax dollars to purchase both tangible and non-tangible products on behalf of TCC. We hope to identify and explain some of the most common questions asked related to employee expense management. By providing an outline of the entire program and what it entails, we hope to help employees better understand how each of you contributes to our program's success. These are the key talking points. Oops, sorry. I just lost my other file. I'm glad it's just y'all. Hold on. How do I get my other thing back? It changed on. Oh, wait, I know how to get it. Bear with me 1 second, please. I guess I need to use a different screen, maybe. Placing the power of funds commitment. Oh, sorry. Introduction. I will quickly introduce the team that manages this program and the resources we depend on daily. Working parts of employee expense management and how each part and deadline intertwine to make the process come together smoothly. TCCD one card and reimbursement evolution, when we began keeping records and where we are now. Guidelines related to expense funds. It's a simple process when you see the reasons for the guidelines and keep in mind where the funds are generated. Concur best practices for reporting. This is pretty much everything we really don't have control over ourselves. Non-compliant versus compliant expenses. And what determines the difference. Working from home, making lemonade out of lemons and using what we have learned to move forward. Employee responsibility, management from the top down and then back up to the top. Projects in process, a few goals for the near future and some key projects already begun. And then additional resources, our best recommendation for resources. Let's begin with the management team. This is exactly how we all look when we gather. Since there are only 6 of you on, and I know every one of you fairly well, this may not be as serious as you expected. As you can see, our program has many different departments dedicated to working together to make sure every aspect of our program is compliant. Procurement is the SAP Concur Contract Owner Manager and was the lead on the selection committee, instrumental part in the review, decision, and implementation in September 2018. Procurement also manages the overall process of employee expense management and the annual renewal of the contract. One card and employee reimbursement guidelines are reflective of all procurement guidelines. This department is managed by our Executive Director of Procurement, Mike Herndon. He is also one of the only 3 appointed by the TCCD Board of Directors to sign any legal binding contract. We'll touch on that again later, but that's very important. Diane Parrish is the Compliance Advisor and Administrator and is on the call today to help answer questions after the presentation. We also have the Finance Department. While the Finance Department does not own the contract, they are a critical driving force, in particular as it relates to reimbursements and processing payments. Director Stan Vick approves any issues or changes related to what reimbursements are compliant. We also have Melinda Morris on the finance side, who was instrumental in creating and launching the Concur program. Primarily, she is the one that manages and keeps current all the GL numbers and is the one behind the scenes that generally makes any changes required in Concur. Ms. Elena Martinez is attending today to answer questions related explicitly to employee expense reimbursement and travel. Next is information technology, which is responsible for guiding us in any technology-related program approvals and resolution of issues. Ms. Pat Boudreau is also present today for questions on the team chat. While the above are our most active departments to work with, we also work directly with 2 groups and facilities related to any type of furniture purchased or anticipated repairs that require consideration related to items purchased using a one card are paid from an employee's personal card for reimbursement. For example, the mini sneeze guards are partitions requested for purchase early in March were directed to our facilities liaison. We work closely with human resources as it relates to staff, faculty, and student guidelines. Their assistance comes into play when involved in student group travel, such as rooming related to Title IX guidelines. We also depend on HR for the changes in colleague that allow the program to run smoothly. Last but not least, and most important recently, we work directly with Safety and Emergency Management and one of their divisions that manages the emergency response and PPE distribution. Their input and partnership is usually related to insurance, related to travel, vendor or merchants insurance, and bulk PPE orders. We are currently working on creating a document to allow compliant reimbursement for travel during travel restrictions, local day trips, and overnight travel. All of these departments add information and guidelines for us to follow. We then document the process and include them in any changes or issues that have not been addressed in the past. Expense management resources are the groups and organizations. How about this? We have relationships with. Their guidelines are the building blocks on how our program is designed. If they make changes, we enforce them. If we have questions or need clarification, they direct us. We communicate for many reasons with these resources regularly. Our primary responsibility is to report information to the TCCD Board of Directors by way of internal audit. The Board of Directors is ultimately responsible for employee expense management, both reimbursement and one-card guidelines. The original guidelines were written and then ultimately approved with the help of the board. As mentioned earlier, during the history of TCCD, the procurement department guidelines were strenuously reviewed and adopted for the organization. When the original purchasing cards were introduced, they were a byproduct of procurement, strictly monitored and used by a small select number of employees. TCCD is a higher education, tax-exempt, academic organization managed by all the rules and regulations of the State of Texas Comptroller's Office. As such, we are considered a government entity and must abide by all state of Texas laws as a government employee. Our bond funds are strictly monitored by both state and local government based on taxpayer dollars. Federal government provides grants and guidelines based on student programs. In recent months, the CARES Act has been vigorously used to provide PPE for the organization and grant funds for our students to help continue their education during these trying times. JP Morgan sorry, I didn't make this a PDF. JP Morgan Chase is the banking institute that manages our accounts and provides feed uploaded to the one card reports every night at midnight. JP Morgan uses your CID, college ID, to read which charges are associated with your assigned one card account. In turn, our feed to Concur is made at 4 p.m. daily. So they're an intricate part of this process. MasterCard provides the plastic one card and manages the card's insurance that allows for reimbursement for non-employee fraudulent charges. Their program has precise guidelines that must be adhered to. We have a commercial account that is managed on site by the expense management team, us. That is the reason you contact us rather than JP Morgan when any type of card is issued and there are problems. This bears repeating. Any fraud or irregularities or issues of any kind with the card should immediately be directed to TCC Expense Management. SAP Concur is the expense management program contracted by Tarrant County College District that integrates expense reporting and a complete travel booking solution used by the organization. Currently, SAP pulls information from colleague. However, if you haven't heard, we are currently looking to replace the ERP program solution. And so consequently, I know that some of the departments were asked to do a recap of colleague, but it's not going to change. It's really, I think anyone that's been here for a time understands that the instruction you receive related to colleague is based on just people in your department. And one of the reasons for that is because we've had colleague long enough that to make it work best for all of us, we've introduced different portions along the way. And I'm not sure how long that's been. I think either at least 10 years, if not 15 years. So there truthfully are no training modules that can be used that will suffice for everyone in the organization. And once we put all of these parts together, all the working parts are in place, and we want all of our employees to be part of this team. We need input from you on how to make the program better and how to provide you with the best possible service within the restrictions of all these working pieces. And here's another hurrah. Information technology in the digital world. 3 cheers for IT. TCC's IT staff and leaders were ahead of the curve. They had the ability to use their combined efforts to move forward immediately with many useful and valuable additions quickly and seamlessly. We do know and understand what a challenge it has been for faculty and some staff to move into a more digital electronic atmosphere. I know some of you are the person on the other side of the brick wall, holding their ears and shaking their heads. Our employees also need to know that we in our department are here to help and hold your hand while going through step by step of any our related processes. It takes only a simple email to ask for one personal time for personal time with any one of our team. And I am saying Elena, Diana, or myself, because we know that we can teach someone the process fairly quickly. They're available in their departments to pass it on rather than us having to train many, many different people many different times. And as you will see later in the presentation, one of our goals is to create simple to use recorded processes with more details to help you through all the different information we have to offer. And they're going to be just chunks and bits and pieces individually created. So if you have a problem with employee meal per diem and how to access it when you return from your trip, there's a special way to hold your mouth. There's certain things you have to do in the program to make it work. And I think Elena and I agreed that there is nothing that specifically outlines that other than some screenshots she's made. So we're happy to do that whenever you need us. Pardon me that I have to just keep coming over here. This is the TCC card and reimbursement evolution. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over all these figures because I didn't hear anyone that was a math dean that was crazy enough to be interested in all these figures. But this kind of gives you a bird's eye view of where we've come in only 10 years. And if you notice, if we include fiscal year 2019, you'll see that in a minute. Obviously, it was not a typical year, January to September, well, March to September for anyone, but especially us. The oldest documents we had archived went back to 2009, where we had only 52 employees issued cards, and they only allowed $500 per purchase and only $1,000 per month. The cards were very limited and primarily used by upper facilities managers for the purchase of needed supplies in case of an emergency, and some of the departments in the liberal arts that always need some unusual things, and then also the child care education department at Northeast for the purchase of fresh food. So it was interesting to see what I did find, because it has obviously changed a great deal. That process was tedious. The reports were created on paper and the receipts taped to sheets for submittal and sent through inner office. And I felt like when I came on board, I finally was able to have them scanned to me, which probably saved us cases and cases of paper, or excuse me, caused us to use cases of paper because I had to print them. But at least when they came in, we could sort them uh, in the software versus literally untaping receipts that were upside down or sideways or crumpled. I felt like I needed to bring an iron into the department on occasion. And I'm sure Elena experienced that same thing with her trees reports. But, and then we couldn't read the names, so we really didn't even know who was approving them. You could get used to some and they were really approving, but then sometimes you knew that it wasn't the right signature. So we went from 52 cards to 1,175 now. So I should do the percentage, but what is the increase in 10 years? And I actually didn't come on board until I think 2015 in July. And we had 162 cards. So that's how much we grew just within the time frame that we decided to go to an expense management program where we would not be handling cash in the future. The spend in 2009 for 1 year was $372,000. In 2015, it was $802,000. But then in 2019, now this particular figure is only for P cards, and they only had a little bit of travel on them the beginning of 2019. We hadn't even incorporated travel to that, to P cards, and we did 2,356,321. So the MCCs were limited for the first two types of cards, and now they're tiered and we have a lot more open. This just indicates that the process was paper and now it's electronic. The approvals were manual, and now they're set by HR, which some people don't understand how that works, and I think I may have some information on that here. And the GL was numeric, but the full GL, and if you're familiar with if you use Concur now, one of the things that finance was able to do was take the object code that is, I think it's a 6-digit number, could be 5, that's off the top of my head, I haven't seen one in so long. But rather than anytime you were creating a report, you'd have a 3-page sheet to look through to see what you needed to charge it to. And there were so many options that people would call me and ask me who to charge it to. So this is kind of where we are with cards. And then just the notation down here at the bottom is travel and expense reimbursement were still not a part of the program at that time. Now, pardon me just one second because I don't think I have the notes here. So that's okay. Maybe it'll go better. So this is Elena's page because it's then and now. And so if we had a bunch of people on this call that were my age and had been here for 40 years, I have not, but they would understand the big difference in this. And some of you that have been here for, well, over 5 years, you'll know. But as an example, personal vehicle mileage. In the past, everyone had an Excel sheet that they used as a cheat sheet. We don't even know if each department, much less, or I should say each campus, much less each department, had the same documentation. Those were documents that people that were thinking smarter and not harder would create for their department. So they would have an easy mileage figure. But then there was nothing that said, well, this is what we're going to use to compute this mileage. So we never knew if it was someone turning in their mileage from their car and they took the long way home because they ran errands, or whether they just guesstimated. So now this is all in Concur. It's based on Google, and that's the law. So I did have a couple of times even presidents of campuses send me an email and say, I don't think this mileage is correct. This looks like it's a little more than it takes me or whatever. And I said, doesn't matter if it's from our campus location or one of our district offices to where they're doing business, depending on whether it's district mileage or day trip, then we go by Google. That is supposed to take into consideration if there is construction at any particular time or new roads open or whatever. Then with the meal per diem, in the past, you may remember we only gave $36 a day, and now if you fly to, I think it's Hawaii, you get $120 a day. So that is built into Concur, and it is calculated off of government GP, the federal government GPA pricing. So see, those are two things that Elena still has to monitor to just make sure that it looks right. But there are just she doesn't have to literally use a computer. Or what did we used to use that TI made? What were those things called? Calculators that and double check people's figures. The travel advantages, we have a lot. I'm not going to get into that because we can't travel right now, and some things are changing. The expanded allocations have to do with the fact that you do get more meal per diem and some other things. You can create your CTL. What is it? Your application for payment. Your teaching, isn't that what training application, or I know what it is, but I can't remember what the abbreviation is. Processing time is much, much quicker, and so is reimbursement to TCC. Some people may not be familiar with reimbursement to TCC, but reimbursement to TCC is, we were doing this some in the past before we had 100% item audit. We would catch it. We would even have people send us a check paper clipped to their report in interoffice mail with no notes to reimburse TCC for whatever they felt the amount was. But since we're a procurement and we're at TR and we're not finance, We had to take all that information, send an email, ask what it was for, and then forward it to finance and just make sure that it got taken care of. Not that finance wouldn't, but you never know when a check's going to get lost in the mail. So we've corrected all of that. So that's a yippee. This is how all of this that you've just looked at breaks down. This is the information from our fiscal year 2019-2020. Sometimes you will get different figures on reports or comments that someone may make because, well, a couple of reasons. JP Morgan actually judges us annually from January to December. But of course, we use a fiscal year, so we start in September and stop in August. Also, when you're talking about reimbursements for travel, some of those come in different months, and you'll see that especially in one of these next really quick examples I want to show you. So this is by spend policy. And Melinda creates this for us because the finance side has always looked at what policy it's linked to. I was the one that looked at how much work we had to do, which was based off of all the documentation from MasterCard and JP Morgan. So we've combined these. The spend, based on the spend policy, these are the figures from 2019-2020. And reimbursement and day trips is all that Elena does, not necessarily manually, but there's a lot more work in those than just about any other reports. But then she also does travel, which part of it is going to be on a P card expense and part could be out of pocket. So that's why she actually has to know both processes. These are the figures I pulled from the transaction averages. These are low, and in a minute, I'm going to tell you why. But one card reports for non-travel, they average about 181 reports, full reports per month. So Diane is pretty much responsible for those. She has to do those in about 10 working days. Reimbursement in day trips, Elena has 150 average per month, and hers are a little bit more tricky because they tend to be more, I would say, out of the ordinary, quite a few meals, things that people aren't sure of the guidelines, or maybe they've asked for meal per diem in advance and then they don't understand how that works. So she and I have to powwow sometimes and say, okay, the total amount they spent on meals is this, regardless of the fact that they accidentally used their P card one time. So we're a little bit more, we get into the trenches with the specific cost, and we try for a good compromise that's fair to keep people from losing any meal per diem they've already received or they're expecting to receive. And because Elena's in finance, she can deduct and make changes and do all kinds of things because she's the one that processes the checks. So she can tell everybody what to do. And then as soon as they send it back, she's ready to go. The same thing applies with travel overnight. Elena and gets the majority of these. Every once in a while, if there's something that's really simple and only has a couple of lines or three, and Elena's bogged down, or maybe she's decided she may take one day off in 3 months, then we all try to back up each person. Now, think about this. When you think of us processing card payments, and I start talking about how many average reports there are, you also have to take into consideration the lines on each report. So you could have one report, eliminating barriers was one. I saw one while ago that had 120 lines on it. How many line transactions are there? How many invoices do you have to look at? How many questions have to be emailed back and forth? How many times do we send these back? And that's because a lot of people don't understand, and it's just because it's not the nature of your job. But especially, I think faculty more than corporate staff, because we see the big picture more as we've kind of got our hands in every little bucket. But faculty is pretty much only familiar with what their campus does and what their particular department does. But we don't know that. And if people don't communicate that to us, then we have no way of knowing what they're trying to tell us. And that's going to lead us to another slide that I was specifically asked to address. Now, and here are the number of one cards that we have currently about. Cards numbers vacillate, obviously, because I had like 6 people retire just this week, but then I have like 12 people going to class next week, and most of those people have P cards coming in. So the single user card means it's in your name. And so we have 189 that are active. None of those, thank goodness, expire all at one time, but about 300 do within a short amount of time. Student groups, we have 86 individual student group cards. I'm not working on those right now because they're always going to be considered as part of what we do when we look at it this way, but they're going to have a separate program. And I think we're getting close, but I bet you all don't have a lot of questions. Crunching numbers by the month. I added this just because it is what it is this year. Because I want you to see how these months from March, I think we knew on the 13th, I sent Elena and Diane a copy of an email that I received from a faculty person on the Thursday during spring break. And he was the first person that his conference was canceled. And anybody that knows me knows I work most holidays because it's the quietest time to work. And his email began, "I'm sorry to bother you on spring break." Well, okay, I'm sitting here at my desk. But I found out my trip's canceled because of the pandemic. And the minute I read that, I just got cold chills because I thought, what are we in for? So these are the figures by month, the transactions we had. So with one card, they're not so bad. They stayed fairly level, but I will tell you why. Right here are charges that people made in February for just whatever, and everybody was working. A lot of these would have been placed before spring break, getting ready for spring break, right? So anybody that's a faculty knows that the preparedness a lot of times the time for that is taken before spring break. So when you get back, everything's ready. So this was probably people ordering extra folders or things for their students or the student groups. But then you see it decline, especially in May. So no one's necessarily has transactions, but also these are transactions. We also don't see in this, we will in a minute down here, credits. You can't tell how much of these are charges and how much are credits. So then we get to reimbursements and day trips. We also watch how the traffic runs in December and January. We always have a bunch of people that make reservations and try and travel the beginning of December or the very first of January. So here we had some expenses, but then in March we had 77. But those 77 were only a portion of what we were able to reconcile of 500 trips that were canceled within a matter of 1 week, maybe two, with no direction, if you remember, from the airlines, if anybody in the travel industry. So all of these will add up to about 500 travels, conferences that were already registered for. It took us this long. I'm trying to think. I think we still were getting some credits in November and December, weren't we? A few, Elena? But you don't have to answer to that. I know you like being muted. But you can't believe how difficult it was to get all of this taken care of and sorted out. So Elena was extremely busy right in here. Then line transactions dwindled, but look at the line transactions in February and March. We were still busy. So we are down by about $2 million in 2019, 2020 as far as expenses. And this one, and plus student groups do a lot of traveling in April, May. I don't know. I know that Upward Bound does their trip in June or maybe early July, and they have 130 students traveling to Florida. So we have tons if we're not restricted from travel. This is grant money that was given to eliminating barriers prior to the CARES Act. So we've always had this activity. It was a new program in September. This $50,000 and 178 transactions were made in April, just as we got the information about, the CARES Act, and we worked with his last name, just Peter, to figure out how this was going to work. But any of you that work with students will realize that when things like that happen, it just gets really busy. This would have been Diane's work to get all of these reconciled. And that's just the number of those are the number of lines that were charged in that 1 month. Okay, I'm hurrying, but do we have any questions yet? Can somebody tell me that?
Yes, one person asked, would you be able to speak about the flyers, emails, attendees list needed to reconcile purchases, items, and services on the P card? I think it's the next slide.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the only question.
Oh, and just so Hannah knows, I actually took the email that had, and she will see it in this next one, because I did exactly what I was asked to do, except I'm nicer about it. than I was when I sent out the emails. So this is guidelines for expense purchases. And these are the rules. And there's our rule. In general, all guidelines are created to prevent employees from committing TCCD funds on items that are not considered a requirement to fulfill a business need. Our business is the business of educating young adults. I know that there are cutesy things that you guys like to give the students, and that's acceptable. There are games, there are those kind of things, and this kind of links to what the question was. But it all has to be within reason, and we don't necessarily agree that everyone in the department that is not necessarily part of that student organization should be gifted with the same items. I try never to point a finger at anybody, and so I will speak in general, but let me give you a couple of good examples. When you have a group of students that are going to volunteer to, and maybe they're like a PTK group, or maybe not even that, maybe just a TCCD South Campus group, and they have really good hoodies. And I like those hoodies myself. But those hoodies should not be purchased. You shouldn't purchase an extra 20. So by the time Christmas rolls around, whoever has access to those can give them as gifts. I've received gifts from departments and they stay in one little box and they go to the Goodwill. I'm not going to be rude, but on our side, we're not supposed to receive gifts from anyone. And on our employees' side, we really want them to take into consideration what exactly contributes to the betterment of that student and your opportunity to fulfill their needs, if that makes sense. And of course, the directors or the people that are traveling with the groups, surely they can have, um, uh, hoodies or windbreakers or whatever is popular at the time. But I'm going to take this a step further. I happen to know that procurement is working on a bid for trinkets and trash and specialty items. And so the list is going to dwindle down to what a committee decides to order, and you will have to go through Marketplace, because then those vendors will know the process for getting everything approved through our design group, and they will commit to better prices, committed to the volume. So that's not going to be tomorrow. It probably won't be finalized, I don't think, until next fiscal year. But this is it. We want everybody to have a mindset of these are the things that we really need to get our job done. So we're going to go. But see, it says in general. And another thing about committing TCCD funds, another mindset that you need to remember is in the past, when you created a requisition in Marketplace to ask for funds for anything, those funds came from your budget immediately. When you commit TCCD funds by using the card or by even contracting and saying you will use the card, those funds don't come out until the the charges made. So say, for example, if you ordered a large order of specialty sweatshirts sometime in July, or say late July, and you don't communicate that with your budget folks in your department, then you're not going to have the money to pay for that particular item that you ordered. So there are a lot of reasons for this. I'm going to speed it up, no questions, but you are going to get all of these with more documents, as a matter of fact. Here's the slide for Hannah and Diane, because Diane's the one that writes the 5 W's in great big letters. But this is important because we have to have this information. Our organization is liable to the IRS and to the federal government and to the state of Texas audits and to the board of directors if there are things that happen that someone complains to audit, that someone's not, they don't believe someone, whomever, is doing something properly, then that is reported to us, and we go back 5 years. So you don't want that to happen. So this is not a new process. This is a new way of explaining the process, because what we need are who requested this purchase, what will the item be specifically used for, when will this item be used, where will this item be inventoried, distributed, or given to? Why is this something you don't normally purchase? Let me tell you how this works, and I'm going to try and talk really quick too. But as an example, if you are a student group and you are driving to Waco, Texas, and taking 40 screaming kids in 6 cars, and to be careful, you would like to be able to communicate and talk to the other cars that you have this caravan going. So we had a group that stopped. They didn't think ahead. They stopped at a QT and purchased chargers and some other things. I can't remember, because, now if you've got this kind of equipment, it comes over your radio or whatever. But, granted, this was at the last minute. But I will tell you, during audit, the question we were asked, are those items, now we're talking about some items that probably cost $11, $12, $15 a piece, but they bought a considerable number. And I had to ask the dean of that department that was over that particular group where these items were. Since most of the items were left in the cars of the people that drove, as nothing that belonged to TCC or should be an inventoried item, they had to pay for that out of pocket. And whoever's card it's on, or whoever pays it out of their own personal money, they will not get a refund, and they will have to reimburse TCC. That's what that one thing was when it said reimbursement for TCC. We have a new process for that. I hope no one on this call ever has to use it. The other thing that comes into play that's really important is the timeline. Let me back up just a little bit. Hannah, I can write up something to give you this for events, because that's really what we call them, student events or that sort of thing. And it's kind of over here in the next slide. But any of that, actually, I think we have a lot of it that we've written up for student groups and things, but we're trying hard this year to get everything inside TCC. We've already cleaned up travel. So if you go into inside TCC and just click travel as the search word, it's all set up in there really nice. As a matter of fact, next time you have nothing better to do on a weekend, just log in to Inside TCC and search for travel. But the timeline, JP Morgan closes statement the last day of the month. I download it, and we have to pay it immediately. The team, meaning Diane, myself, and Elena, with the help of all these other people, if there is anything that's non-compliant, like IT, furniture, all those things that we know we can't buy, we have to send all those back. They have to go back through the process. And by then, when we get to the last day that whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I was going to point on the thingy, that we can finalize our reports, we're rushing and we're going crazy. And sometimes we're even, especially with COVID, we've had people out ill. We've had to do a lot of summary emails that says, okay, I've done this because of, and pushed it through. That's not the way we like to do it, but we document it in 5 or 6 different ways. And then the thing with MasterCard, if you ever have a charge that you think is not yours and you really don't know anything about it, it is most likely fraud. But by the time the charge is made, it goes through JP Morgan, it goes to Concur, and then we look at it at the beginning of the next month. 30 days have already gone by, and we cannot get that money back, and we've lost a lot. We had one just recently with someone, and we're going to address it real quickly, but because it's a reoccurring charge for Shutter, what is it, Shutterbox or something, that person's admin registered them for a year ago, and this person who is a director took days to try and get them to remove the charge and close it out. But because someone else entered it and created it, it was in that person's email and had all their codes on it, and they just wouldn't work with her. So I ended up with 3 or 4 reports to JP Morgan to force my hand. So just please, that's why we're so sensitive to timelines, because we can't turn in this report if it's a penny off. A penny. All right, here's the non-compliant versus compliant expenses. Nothing has changed. It's 2 o'clock, Hannah. Is my electricity going to go out or what?
No, it's not. If you want to, there's a couple of other sessions that people can leave to, but if they would like to stay for maybe the next 5 minutes, that's absolutely fine. Sorry, my notifications.
No, I know. I turned everything off. Nobody can call me or anything. I'm going to talk really fast, but again, you all are going to get copies of this, and then each one of these subjects will have more details, okay? But nothing has changed. All of these things in this entire group are listed in the procurement guidelines and noted in the P-card guidelines. But even though we have people swear, prick their fingers, swear on blood that they've read these, we certainly don't expect you to remember every line in the procurement guidelines or the P-card guidelines for years and years. Diane can tell you it takes a little while to remember all of this. But this is in order of what we see on a regular basis: sales tax, technology-related items, over-tipping, furniture items, gifts, awards, decorations, and recurring charges. None of these should ever be on a report. As an example, Pat is very gracious to do these in arrears. And it's something that she doesn't have to do. This is something she does for us so we can get these charges on through the system. But like I said, if someone goes out, and we've had several that have spent an awful lot of money and gone and put them on an expense report. And once we go all the way up the ladder through IT, and they say no, that person has to reimburse TCC, and they can take that item home with them. if they haven't already given it away. And I have a screen that I had brought up, and I won't read it, but this is anything related to technology. That means GoToMeetings, Zoom, Kaboom, all of these little programs that everybody thinks they can just purchase and then TCC will pay for it. Well, number one, if they're not approved by TCC, and of course we worry about cyber fraud and people breaking in and through some of these little secret places they can get through. So we don't approve some of them, but also the problem is if you contract for one of these even web programs, and then you leave the organization, just like I was explaining about that director, and it's on your card in your name, even though that's a TCC card, it gets closed down when you leave. So obviously no other payments can go through, but they're going to try to, but no one can use that software in the meantime. So that's like, that just can't be done. Over tipping, that's just because we haven't trained people a lot on that. Furniture, we've had a lot of that during COVID, and I have to work with facilities to get that approved. Gifts, awards, and decorations. Gifts by the IRS are considered anything that is not part of your paycheck. It's a gift. A greeting card for $2 is a gift, and if you have a good friend, you need to make a gift card for them, or you need to pay for it out of your pocket. You don't know how many times I've seen breakfast muffins purchased for a get together in the morning, and then when I question anybody, they may say, well, I just wanted to treat the department. Well, you know what? Diane can tell you when I treat the department, and I'm not a manager, but if I'm coming in early and I go by Dunkin' Donuts, then everybody in the department gets a reward because I couldn't sleep that night. A reward. I'm looking at awards. But individual awards, like little plaques that go to employees, those are gifts. We don't buy decorations. So please, 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 before you ever do any of that, shoot us an email. We had one just this Christmas that someone purchased, of all things, Tiff's treats. Well, what is the first thing you think of Tiff's treats? I know they're cakes. I mean, they're cookies, but they're gift box cookies. Now, if they wanted to have a virtual meeting and the director wanted to do this and buy some food and prove that it was exactly the cost of what they spent last year when they brought food in, that could have been considered. And it wouldn't be us saying yes or no. But gifts, they didn't get paid for. They're trying to get the president's budget number right now. And then recurring charges, we've talked about that. The question that someone asked about contracts, I mentioned this earlier. An employee of TCC cannot sign their name on any agreement for $15 that is a written agreement with a vendor or merchant for services rendered or space used. The reason for that is, and I have a blurb from Carol that I include with the emails, but the board of directors, part of their program when it was first introduced, our insurance will not cover anything unless the contract is signed by Mike, Susan Alanis, or Dr. Giovannini. Carol Bracken will look over them for someone, but those three people are the only ones that can sign them. The way I got involved with this was a lot of student organizations may be getting the balloon man or the picture man, and as long as he was less than $1,500, or maybe he was more, but they didn't ask for an override before they made the charge. So when the charge comes through of $3,000, they would email me and ask me to increase their card. And then as I'd been here longer, I understood the process. It's the same thing for events. If there is any, we have 2 or 3, most of these are corporate. On the corporate side, we do have a couple of divisions that have had an annual party, and they take X amount of people, and then the people pay for part of it. A CTL is a good example. CTL takes employees on events, and they kind of lock them up for 2 or 3 days in a nice hotel, and they do things. In the past, whoops, I can't play with the screen. In the past, events went through Marketplace, but then it created an issue because obviously if you're creating an event and say, let's use, I know IT goes on quite a few, but let's use the breakfast, Dr. Giovannini's breakfast. Well, obviously that's not going to be something that everyone's invited to. It's considered an event, but we can't, as a department, go out and really get a competitive bid because each event place has different things to offer. You know, either their food's better or they're closer, their access, whatever. So those can't be paid even by a president of a campus. Group airfare, which has to do with student groups, and when they fly and schedule more than 10 people, you're going to be asked to sign a contract. You can't do that. Gift cards cannot be purchased without Mike's signature. That's an entire process. In-kind speaker gifts are allowed, but you have to make sure that if the speaker has a PSA, that you can prove that the in-kind gift offsets the fact that they didn't charge for something. It's only an in-kind gift. Now, if you give out a $10 gift, then maybe that might go through. But I'm talking about sometimes we get some pretty nice award-looking things. And again, I'll have a lot more detail on this. The next one is working from home, and this is going to have a lot of details that will be added to this. I know you all feel like this 6-arm bandit up here that's on a speakerphone, a computer, an iPhone. I can't even tell what they're, oh, he's got a briefcase. But implementation of temporary work from home practices for designated employees were at the time, considered a one-time option because if you'll remember, originally in March, we weren't sure if this was going to go on or not. We weren't prepared for it. We didn't know what to do. But in my opinion, the good news is we all came through this really well. So at that time, we didn't have anything in place to order items to get them delivered to your residential address because the guidelines with the state of Texas specifically says that anything you are reimbursed for or that is charged on a P card has to be delivered to a campus or, in our case, a division location. So it specifically says that. So if we had allowed people to just start buying things, then it would have come back on us and just been a terrible situation. We've actually had a VPAA that had a tendency to do this right before Christmas break, which I understand that. They just want it to come to them. But they only did it once because they will have their card taken away because it's not against our rules. It's against the state of Texas rules and our board of directors.
Oh, Miss Linda.
Uh-huh.
This is Hannah. We have about 3 more minutes until our next session is starting. So if anyone has any questions for Linda or anything like that, there's anything, final remarks you wanted to show Miss Linda, and then I'm going to stop the recording and let everybody go. And if anyone wants to stay behind, feel free.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I was just at the last two. I was going to go over the working from home, but again, I can write this up because I needed to anyway. That's the reason I was so anxious to say yes. Not that I like doing this, but we need this. We need this. So if you're an individual that says, I'm working from home, I need to be able to dissect this, have a one-page piece of information that Diane can easily send to you. And then it will talk to the difference in staples and going through marketplace and that sort of stuff. If I could clone myself, if anybody in the science departments figures out a way, I will be one of the first volunteers. And then you'll have 6 of me running around and no one will know which the mean one is versus the nice one. Okay, do you have any questions, Hannah? And is this the kind of information you believe people would profit from? Not profit, they'll sell it. Will, be able to use and have handy? Because I'm happy to move forward.
Absolutely. I thank everyone so much for coming and joining us today. And if y'all have questions, please email. I'll send out an email kind of with this recording, things that Linda will type up in the future, and we'll go from there. But thank you all so much. And Linda, thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye.
So we can stay in this queue if it's
Yes.
just my department. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Feel free. All right. Bye, y'all. Thank you.